What end-time events does the Battle of Jericho and its hero, Rahab the harlot, symbolize? The Bible's account of Jericho, where God caused the walls to fall down, is full of end-time meanings. The battle was 7 days, just like the end times are 7 years. In both, there were 7 trumpets, 2 witnesses or spies. The walls fall with a shout, and there is a harlot. That last character is ignored, but maybe is one of the most important. She is what we're talking about today, and we're starting right now. Christians always want to play a key role. I mean, wouldn't you like to be compared to the heroic Joshua, the commander? But you know, Joshua or Yeshua in the Hebrew has the same name as Jesus, and that is who he is a symbol of. Jesus, who defeats the world system during the 70th week of Daniel. Well, it would also be cool to be one of the 2 spies who are sent into Jericho before the battle, but Revelation has 2 witnesses, and we aren't those witnesses. What about the priests who blow the ram's horns or trumpets as they circle the city? That's another role that would be fun to play, but in Revelation, it's the angels of God who blow his trumpets. No, the Christian's role is kind of like getting the role of a sheep in the kindergarten Christmas pageant. Christians play a less glamorous role. Rahab is probably a better symbol of who the Christians are in the story, but it is a key role and a role of the redeemed Jews and Christians that our heavenly Yeshua frees eventually from Jericho. In fact, in this video, you're going to find out that Rahab was written about by a number of the epistle writers and even a gospel writer, something the spies and the trumpet-blowing priests never were. So let's look at the Bible account and see why that is. Prior to the battle, Joshua, the son of Nun, sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, "Go view the land, especially Jericho." And they went and came into the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab and lodged there. We know the historical story. Joshua sent spies into the city for military intelligence purposes. But what might this story mean symbolically? Well, Jericho stood in the way of Israel entering the promised land. Its name means a place of concealment. The city had high walls that concealed the people within it. Symbolically, we saw Joshua or Yeshua is Jesus. He first commands the people, "Prepare your provisions, for within 3 days you are to pass over the Jordan to go in and take possession of a land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess." And it's likely that during the 2-day period, while they're waiting to go, he sends the spies into the city, just as Moses has sent 12 spies into the land 40 years earlier. In fact, Joshua was one of those first 12 spies, one of the 2 faithful ones. This is another of the famous 2-day passages in the Bible that signify that Jesus delays 2 days or 2,000 years from his ascension until he returns on the 3rd day. As 2 Peter 3 tells us, a day to the Lord is like 1,000 years. And he sends the spies into the city during that 2-day period, which is equivalent to the great city of Mystery Babylon. So it was during this 2-day period that Yeshua sent the spies into the pagan city. But what 2? Since the 2 witnesses in Revelation are likely Moses and Elijah, representing the law and the prophets, that's what the 2 represent here as well, I think. It's his word that has gone out into the world. And in the Jericho account, these spies end up at the house of a harlot, a house of ill repute, but they were likely not there for nefarious purposes. Her house likely doubled as an inn, and that's why they were there to gain information, and as strangers, it would be a place where they wouldn't be as noticed. To Rahab, it's pretty obvious who these men with foreign accents are, however, and she makes this profession of faith to them. "I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, who was a giant, by the way, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Pretty good profession of faith right there. So Rahab professes faith that Jehovah is the God of gods in heaven and on earth. She then hides the spies on her roof under stalks of flax. Now, if these are symbolic of the word of God, the spies that she hides, then she is hiding the word under flax on her roof, under her hair, on the top of her head. In other words, she is memorizing the word. This is absolutely a key symbolic truth that's going to become important in just a moment. Then the king of Jericho, who likely symbolizes Satan, gets wind that the spies were at Rahab's house. If she could identify their accents, well, probably the other guests could too. But she lied to the king and told him that the spies had left and escaped through a city gate. She then urged the king's troops to hurry after them to catch them, even though the spies were still hiding in her house. The soldiers wisely decided to first lock up the city and then go look for the spies, implying that if they didn't find them, they'd come back to Rahab's place and do a thorough search. Rahab then went back inside to help the spies escape. Before they left, Rahab asked the spies to promise her to protect she and her family, and she asked for a sure sign of that promise. The spies famously tell her to hang a scarlet cord out of her window, sort of in the way that the Israelites painted the blood of a lamb on their doorposts prior to the Exodus. Both symbols are of the blood of Christ. And the spies were clear to Rahab that the only way anyone would live was if they were inside her house, protected by that scarlet cord. The spies then escaped out the window, left Rahab, and returned to Joshua. Now, if they truly symbolize the word of God, this is very important because they leave Rahab. If she is the symbol of Christians and possibly the church, they no longer have the word. As we have indicated in previous videos, it is likely that the Bible will be declared hate speech in the near future and be banned. Click right here in the upper right to see a video on that very subject. So hiding the word in our hearts and minds may be the only way Christians will have the word during the end times. It's something to consider right now when we are not yet in that time period and still have Bibles. But even if we don't have the word, we will have the promise, just like Rahab had, a tangible promise of the blood of Christ. The writer of the book of Hebrews places Rahab in the hall of faith in Hebrews 11, along with folks like Abraham and Noah. By faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. And James referred to her act of faith in this way: you see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. And in the same way, was not Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? For as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so faith apart from works is dead. This is key because it shows how the church is to act in the end times. It is very likely that Jews and other Christians will be fleeing from the persecution of the Antichrist forces, and those with a roof over their heads may have the chance to hide these other Christians and possibly Jews, just as Rahab did for the spies. Notice Rahab's faith was attributed to her as righteousness when she acted to save the spies. Saving faith is evidenced by works. Those unwilling to help their fellow Christians or God's people, the Jews, might be in for a pretty rude shock upon the return of Jesus, finding out that he thinks their faith is dead. Just like in Matthew 25, at the sheep and goat judgment, where Jesus punishes those who did not help the least of these, those in need during the 70th week of Daniel. Only those who provide evidence through their works show they have true faith. After the spies return to him, Yeshua gathers his army and crosses the Jordan in a mighty miracle of stopping up the water. It's almost certain that the king of Jericho, who was only a mile away upriver, saw this, and that is why he shut up the city, so that no one could come in or go out. Come in or go out. Sounds almost like 2020. There is an uncanny similarity to the lockdowns we've experienced in 2020 and the ones likely coming in the next few years. Is this a symbol in the Jericho story of those lockdowns? Well, maybe. Then Yeshua's army undertakes the most incredible military strategy ever devised. His army circles the city for 7 days, which we already explained is likely the 70th week of Daniel, a 7-year period. Each day for 6 days, they circle the city once. This is symbolic of the first 6 seals, which are circular in shape on the 7-sealed scroll in Revelation 6. What was likely happening at Rahab's house during this time, during those first 6 days? Since the only way to be saved was to be in Rahab's house, I'm sure she was telling everyone. And I assume the crowd in her house was becoming very large. This is symbolic of the role of the church during the first 6 seals, to get as many people under the protection of the scarlet cord or blood of Christ as possible during that time. Then at the beginning of the 7th day, the army circles the city 7 times, blowing its 7 trumpets. The 7 trumpets blow in the final year of the 70th week of Daniel, just like those trumpets. So this final year of the 70th week of Daniel is different from all the other years, as we can see in the Jericho account. If you are not familiar with why, at the end of this video, we will have a link to another video that will explain the final year of the 70th week in detail and why it is so different from the other 6 years. However, at the beginning of the day, the army shouts, just like Jesus returns with a shout in 1 Thessalonians 4, and the walls of the cities fall, just like there is a great earthquake at the 6th seal. When the smoke clears, there is an amazing sight. Only Rahab's house is left standing, the one with the scarlet cord in it, and all of her family are brought out and taken to a safe spot. Symbolically, we know this safe spot is heaven. Then the army of Yeshua, which are angels, symbolically attack the city and burn it with fire. The 1st and 6th trumpet judgments are fire trumpets in Revelation. Now, interestingly, archaeological evidence from Jericho supports all of these findings. When a British archaeologist named Kathleen Kenyon excavated the site in the 1950s, she found piles of bricks all around the base of the city. She determined that they were from the city wall, which had collapsed when the city was destroyed. The biblical record goes on to say that when the walls collapsed, the Israelites set it on fire. Archaeologists found evidence of a massive destruction by fire, just as the Bible describes. And although secular archaeologists believe an earthquake caused the walls to fall, it had to be a very unusual earthquake, because it struck in such a way as to allow a small portion of the city wall on the north side of the site to remain standing. While everywhere else the wall fell, only that portion of the wall and the houses attached to it were still standing. Rahab's house is obviously then still standing today as a testimony to her faith. Something else that's still an eternal symbol of Rahab's faith is found in the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew 1. There you will find that Rahab married a man named Solomon, who I personally and romantically like to think might have been one of the spies. Wouldn't that be cool? And they had a son named Boaz. Yes, that Boaz, who of course was the great-grandfather of King David and eventually was an ancestor of the Messiah Yeshua himself, our Jesus. Rahab is in the bloodline of the Messiah. Proof that sinners like her and like me and like you can end up being part of the eternal family of God. But before we leave the account of Jericho and our heroine Rahab, let's discuss that final 7th year of the 70th week of Daniel. Why is this year different than all the other years of the tribulation period? Click right here to find out what the Bible tells us about the timing of the rapture and the wrath of God, because this is a different year, and how another Old Testament story fills in a lot of these details. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.